Hi there and welcome to Protopilot. My name is Darren Bennett and today we're going to be looking at ProtoPie the software. I'm going to give you a bit of a download, a bit of an insight into what the key features of the software are, why you should learn it, and how it kind of compares. It will give you a good kind of background into how it compares to some of the other design tools out there, maybe some of the design tools that you're using. So without further ado, let's get into it. So ProtoPie is a no-code interaction design tool, and it enables you to create a range of prototypes, some very advanced prototypes, and that's kind of its, I guess, one of its key features. Prototypes that really look and work like real apps. When we talk about ProtoPie, as far as how it's structured, there's something called the ProtoPie concept model. And the ProtoPie concept model is kind of the fundamental underpinnings of how ProtoPie works. So for you as a user using it, how to understand how it works. So every single thing inside of ProtoPie is interaction based. So you start with an interaction and you're going to be applying that interaction to some kind of object. So this could be a button or any other kind of graphic that you might have in your design. So you're going to import that in, or you might be creating it directly inside of ProtoPie. You're then going to apply something called, that ProtoPie calls a trigger. There are a number of triggers that are accessible to you within the software, and we'll go through those in a moment. But a good example of a trigger would be something like a button tap, so like a tap or a swipe. Once you've added your trigger to your objects, you're then going to get access to a list of responses that are available to you within ProtoPie. And the responses are fairly extensive. There's a lot you can do. And you can think of a response could be something along the lines of changing the opacity of an object or jumping to a different scene in your prototype. So there's a number of responses that you can do, scaling an object, rotating an object, things like that. These three things are object, trigger, and response, really kind of underpin everything you do inside of ProtoPie. And they've been kind of structured like that on purpose to replicate the way you interact with objects in the real world. So there isn't any kind of specific kind of like jargonistic words inside of the software. They want to keep the way the software works and the way it's understood as being very plain and simple. And we're going to see that as we continue through. So let's have a look at how you actually build an interaction inside of ProtoPie. So you're going to start, as we said previously, with an object, and here you can see I've got an iOS switch as the example. With that selected, we're going to add a trigger, and as you can see from this interface snippet, here are the range of triggers that you have available to you. Tap being one of the most obvious ones and the most used ones. So you add a trigger from this list. Once you've added your trigger, you're going to have access to the responses that you can select. And these responses can be, you can add more than one response, so you can kind of stack all of your responses together, working together, and you can kind of you can organize them like when they happen through duration and delay and things like that. And here you can see in this interface snippet is how those triggers and responses stack together. So this is how you build an interaction. So you can see at the top, I've got a tap trigger. you'll actually see I've got in the purple strips, I've got a couple of conditions in there. So we've got conditional logic inside of ProtoPie. I've added a condition, and then I've stacked a move and an opacity response, which in this case, the example is this iOS switch. So as it switches, as you tap it, it switches from side to side. It's going to move the circle, and it's going to change the opacity of a layer to kind of give you that feeling that the color's changed. So this is a very rudimentary, very basic flow of how you would add an interaction. So what interactions can you actually do? What can you achieve? So we're going to have a look at what ProtoPie gives you. So first off, we have the triggers. So each one of these squares denotes a specific trigger that you can use. So if we call out a few examples, we've got long press, we've got compass, so you can use the built-in compass inside of your device. We've got drag, which allows you to drag objects around the screen. We've got chain, which allows you to chain a property of one object to the property of another. So there's a wide-ranging set of triggers available to you, which enable you to do some pretty advanced things. Kind of sitting in between triggers and responses is conditions. So as I said previously, you have conditional logic built into ProtoPie, so you can do things like, for example, if you was prototyping a login flow, you could have a condition that takes you to two different screens based on maybe some input that the user has put in. Or as in the previous example that I just showed you with the iOS switch, you can use conditions to initiate different states within a UI component or a piece of your interface. So conditions are pretty powerful. So that leaves responses. So the things that are going to happen, the actions that are going to happen once that trigger has been interacted with. So to call out some examples, we've got jump. So that's a very basic jump to a different scene. We've got rotate. So you can rotate objects around. We've got playback, which allows you to play some videos. So ProtoPie supports the inclusion of video clips. You can change the color of an object. You can scale it. You can reorder layers. So there's a whole bunch of things you can do. And like you saw previously, you can stack these together and you can choreograph them how you want to choreograph them, so you can control the duration of them and the delay of them. And you've got a kind of, and you'll see in future videos, you'll see there's a kind of a sense of a timeline where you can kind of move these things around. So this in front of you is really your playground. These are the things that there's certainly some of the things that you've got at your disposal to imagine your designs within ProtoPie. So now let's take a look at ProtoPie's key features. First off, ProtoPie is an interaction design tool that's focusing mainly on the interaction design side of things. So whilst it has a few basic tools for creating graphics, that's not really its focus. So because of that, it has very tight integration with industry standard tools. You can import files from Sketch, Figma, and Adobe XD into ProtoPie, and there's quite a slick import flow that you can use, and there's a bunch of options inside of there that can help get your graphics into ProtoPie pretty quickly. The second thing is, as we've said a few times now, conditional logic. So you have the ability to set conditions in different ways within your prototype. One of the key features originally, like something that kind of really cemented ProtoPie as a focus, is its ability to interact with sensors within your devices. So things like accelerometer and compass are all accessible and interactable when you build your prototypes within ProtoPie. One of the standout features for me, and something that really kind of pushed me into using the tool and pushed me away from some other tools, and something that kind of really frustrated me in general, was the lack of ability to get input from users as they use my prototype. So ProtoPie has real keyboards built in. So it's using keyboards from both iOS and Android. And it's also got multi-touch gestures, so you can hang interactions off of those multi-touch gestures. Camera and keyboard control are two other things that ProtoPie has as features. So you can record the screen from both the front and the back facing camera, and you also can attach interactions to a range of keyboard keys, A to Z, 0 to 9, and some of the specialist keys as well. Variables and formulas are two other parts of ProtoPie, which I think really start to make it stand out from some of the other tools that you might be used to. So variables are incredibly powerful. You can use variables for a number of different things, from saving the input from a keyboard to creating states in your component. And formulas are a way of calculating dynamic values which you can use in your prototype, as opposed to you just typing in static values. Something ProtoPie can do, which not a lot of other prototyping tools can do as well, is it has the ability for you to create multiple prototypes and have them on separate physical devices, and you can have those prototypes communicate with each other. So, for example, you would be able to prototype a live chat app, for example. ProtoPie also has components. So you'll be familiar with components from tools like Sketch, Adobe XD, and Figma. So we can have components and nested components, and then also within those components, we have the concept of overrides and also layout constraints. You can also test your prototypes on real devices. That includes iOS and Android. Even though ProtoPie is very much focused on devices, it does have some capability for you to prototype web experiences, and you can in fact preview your prototypes on the web as well. Some very select features in ProtoPie allows you to communicate with other apps and websites on your device, on the device where the prototype is existing. So for example, you can send a message to Messenger from your prototype, or you could navigate to a real website from within your prototype. You can share and collaborate by putting your prototypes into the cloud, and also within that cloud interface you have version control. So as you upload each iteration, the cloud interface saves a version. So now we're going to have a look at some of those features in a bit more depth. So conditional logic. So you can see here I've got that iOS switch again, just animating left and right, and you can see to the right of it the interaction stack of how that's being achieved. You have a few different conditions which are available to you, the things that you can compare against. So we've got equal to, not equal to, greater than and equal than or equal to, less than and less than or equal to. So most of the time you're using just the equal to if this value equals this, but you've got a number of options there for you. So for device sensors, we've got a number of options. We've got the receive trigger, which is the trigger that allows you to receive messages from another prototype. We've got the proximity sensor, which is the sensor which controls your screen darkening when you take a phone call, when you put it in your pocket. We've got 3D Touch, which allows you to add interaction based on pressure sensitivity. We've got Compass, which is one of the sensors inside of your device. And we've also got Sound and Tilt, which is effectively the accelerometer, which we can control. So as I said previously, we've got keyboard input. There's a number of keyboards available to you. So you've got almost a similar range to keyboards that are available on devices. And this is mainly because the keyboards that are being used are the real keyboards inside of iOS and Android. So I've got the text keyboard, which is the most common keyboard you'll be used to. We've got a URL keyboard, an email keyboard, number pad, and some specific password keyboards. You can see here I'm going to be using a keyboard just to type in my name. And so you can, this is effectively the real keyboard, and you can see how I've just used that input to display my name at the top of the screen. So another thing we've got access to is multi-touch. So you can see from this prototype here that I'm using 2 fingers to scale and rotate this icon. And also I can scroll it up and down. If I try and use my 1 finger, it doesn't work because this is attached specifically to a 2-finger gesture. And again, you can see on the right hand side the stack, the interaction stack of how I made that all happen. So you can see how it's pretty simplistic what I had to do to make all that interaction work. So keyboard input is kind of interesting because there's a couple of things that kind of come to mind and how you might use keyboard. So here in this example, you can see I'm effectively prototyping a TV interface. So we can use the up and down keys to move objects around the screen. Another obvious example of keyboard input would be to create a custom keyboard. Like for example, maybe you want to create a specific custom pin keyboard for your prototype, and you'll be able to do this with custom keys. We also have access to your device's cameras. So you can see here I have a live feed of my front-facing camera, and you can use this to prototype social media apps or photography apps. This is a vain, a kind of very thinly veiled prototype of Instagram, which I'm using here. But you can see how you can use this special camera functionality in your prototypes. So variables and formulas are incredibly powerful. We have 3 different kinds of variables accessible to us: number variables, text variables, and actually hex color variables. So you can see here in this example, I'm going to use a keyboard to type some text into an input field, and I'm going to immediately print it on the screen. And to do this, I'm using a specific trigger and a response. I'm using the detect trigger, which detects when any value has changed. So I'm detecting when my text value has changed, and I'm using that to assign that text to a variable, which I'm then printing directly on the screen. So constructing formulas is fairly simple to do, even though they're incredibly powerful. So I might start with an object like a rectangle, and I want to maybe change its opacity. So you can see here I could just type a hard value, but then to the right you'll notice this FX icon. So that means that I've got the capability of creating a formula in this particular response. So if I tap on that, I open that out, I get this input field, and I can start to build my formula. So again, this is pretty much no code. I've got access to my variables, I've got access to my objects in the drop down list, so I can just kind of select what I need. And you can see here I've selected rectangle 1's height property, and I'm going to use the value from that to drive the opacity of rectangle 2 in this example. So we also have functions. So we've got a specific subset of functions which can be quite handy at times. So we've got text manipulation functions. So for example, I can split. So maybe if I've typed something on a text into a text field, I can split those words separately and save them separately. I can format them. I've got maths functions and color functions, and I've also got some type conversion as well. So you'll see in this example, I'm using a format to format the number at the top here. In this particular prototype, I'm adding that comma in, and I'm using that to format that. Otherwise, it would just be a 5-digit number. So there you go. There's a whistle-stop tour of the features that ProtoPie has. Hopefully that's piqued your interest in learning a bit more about this tool. I'm going to be doing a lot more videos breaking down these specific features, doing a lot of how-to tutorials on how to build some of these features, and that will all be coming in due course. But just to kind of leave you with a kind of summary and kind of how I feel about ProtoPie as a tool, I think it's a really good tool. Prototype in general is a really good thing to do. It helps you solve problems early, and ProtoPie is powerful enough to you to realize most of the things that you can envisage for your product. It allows you to design the whole product, so there's not really any walls regarding how you might build or envisage how you might build a product or a prototype. So you can get very, very close to building a prototype that acts and works like the real thing. And it allows designers to take control of their designs, so you can really figure stuff out before you have to go and talk to a developer. Or maybe at the moment you're collaborating quite closely with developers and they're building parts of the app for you to kind of work together to kind of tweak it. But with ProtoPie, you can pretty much imagine the interaction design of your product on your own, or certainly within the design process, before you get anywhere near needing to kind of take developers' time away to build prototypes and take their time away from building the real product. So hopefully that gives you a bit of insight into what ProtoPie can do. Like I said, I'm going to be doing a lot of training videos around this particular tool. So if that interests you, then hit subscribe on the channel to make sure that you get notified about videos as and when they get released. And hopefully I'll see you next time.